And so, yeah, so I'm Benji. I'm the co-founder of Shipyard. And at Shipyard, we are pretty focused on ephemeral environments. What are ephemeral environments? They are short-lived, isolated, unique copies of your application that ideally are created and taken down within your software development lifecycle. So you make a code change, and all of a sudden there is a fully isolated environment for everybody in your team to use. So that includes developers for code reviews, product people for feedback, and then obviously QA engineers, or in this particular instance, end-to-end tests. So, and that's what we're going to dive into, how to use end-to-end tests with ephemeral environments. So we have Amrisha joining us a little bit later, and she'll introduce herself then. And then we also have Ashley, who is moderating this for us, so very much appreciated. And she will be taking questions and then moderating a little bit of Q&A at the end there. So please feel free to send in your questions, and she will make sure that we all get them set up and answered. Okay, cool. So we're going to dive in. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about end-to-end tests, how ephemeral environments fit into those. And then obviously, we're going to the bulk of this will be about MaestroQA, using those end-to-end tests to improve a whole bunch of processes and a bunch of stuff. Great. So first off, what are end-to-end tests? Well, you have a few different types of tests in software. The overarching view is that when you're about to release some software, you should have some confidence that things aren't going to be broken. And the easiest way to do that, or the most basic way, is using unit tests. That's kind of taking small subsets of your code and giving it a value, and then making sure that the expected value comes out of it. That's pretty easy to do if you just have code. Gets a little more complicated when you start doing integration tests, and then it gets a lot more complicated when you do end-to-end tests. Some people refer to integration tests and end-to-end tests interchangeably. For this exercise, we'll kind of separate them a little bit. But ultimately, what end-to-end tests mean is that you are testing your entire application workflow from start to finish. So you're finding potential timing bugs that you wouldn't have seen if it was just testing a subset, or other types of conflicts that you don't necessarily find. The thing that's really important about end-to-end tests is that you want to be as realistic as possible. You don't really want to run them on production. Some people do, but you really want to be as close to production as possible, which includes good data, real integrations, and just your full stack environment. So obviously, there's a reason that Shipyard likes people doing end-to-end tests. We'll dive into that a little bit more later. How do teams do end-to-end testing? I mean, this is to teach their own, but the pattern that we've seen a lot of that is a good pattern to emulate is you have your QA teams, or maybe of developers, and they kind of have their own internal QA checklist that they start creating. They say, hey, can I log in? Hey, can I log out? Hey, can I change this setting? Can I do that? Can I do this? And we all have these internal ones as a developer, but then also product people and QA engineers as well. So first you want to formalize that. And then when you start to get into the end-to-end automated side of things using your CI pipeline, you get to use frameworks like Cypress or Selenium or Playwright. And what they do is they fake a browser, and the browser literally does the clicking for you. So you then can automate those. So we highly suggest you use a framework. Cypress is great. Selenium is good. Selenium's kind of been the grandfather of this whole thing. And then Playwright is another great option. That's kind of a little bit the newest kid on the block. And it's really interesting stuff that's happening. So how do teams typically do their end-to-end tests if you're not using ephemeral environments? Well, they develop, then they have a pull request typically. They merge it to main or whatever their deploy branch is, and then you deploy that to staging or some version of staging, and then you start to test on staging. There's a lot of reasons that I'm actually going to let Amrisha, with her real-world experience, speak to of why doing it so late in the process in your software development lifecycle can cause problems. But it's not ideal. And the main reason for that is like this feedback loop. I mean, this could possibly be weeks between a deployment to staging and when the actual developer made the pull request. That's probably a little extreme. It's probably days, but we all know developers switching their mental model can be super tough. So that's important to keep in mind. Okay, so the next slide here is, we recommend a better way. You should shift left end-to-end tests before merge. So you got to have a dedicated testing ephemeral environment per branch. So in this world, we develop, we create a pull request, immediately a ephemeral environment that is production-like and full stack is there, and you can start running your tests and get that feedback loop a lot shorter. So that's super cool. And this is the way to keep the theme from last ephemeral environment Shipyard session we did. Quick side note here. If you want to understand more about ephemeral environments and how to do them and some of the catches and the good best practices and whatnot, we actually did a prior Shipyard session or webinar, whichever way you want to put it. And you can find that on our blog or on our YouTube channel, but we dove into a lot more specifics on why ephemeral environments and how to actually do them. And then obviously we gave a little bit of a demo of using Shipyard to help you with that on your journey for that. Okay, so why isn't everyone doing ephemeral environments, and why aren't they all doing this easier version of, or this sooner version of testing on end-to-end testing? Well, it's a lot of work. You got to manage your state. You got to worry about your seed data. You got to worry about snapshotting data, moving that around. Third-party dependencies become a real problem as well. If you want to really do a full end-to-end test and you integrate with someone else, oftentimes that is very hard to, you need the full end-to-end test to do that. So having an ability to mock that out doesn't always cut it. And so you really need to use some advanced tools, like some of the stuff that Shipyard offers for third-party dependency stuff. Access controls. These are not environments that are meant for prime time. These are environments that are meant for testing and for internal usage and stakeholders playing with it and kicking the tires and whatnot. So it's really important to have good security around these. Making it securely accessible, it's a problem. And then the other thing is that if you are creating environments on every pull request, or even in some cases on every code change, you run into a problem where if you're not keeping an eye on this stuff, your cloud costs are going to be extremely high. So you got to make sure that they're up for the right amount of time, they're down for the right amount of time, they're available when you need them, but they're not just sitting around when you don't. And then obviously the ongoing maintenance and oversight on the platform itself can be challenging and a full-time job. And as Amrisha can dive into in a second, when you are in a situation where you are responsible for a production application, if your job all day long is dealing with environments for non-production, you kind of become an SRE for your internal teams, and you can't, and your focus, it can't be on the external stuff, which is where the customers live, which is what this is all about. So again, end-to-end testing, good for solid, secure, safe, reliable releases that you have faith in. Doing it earlier, better. But I'm going to let Amrisha take it from here. And so with that, I'm going to introduce Amrisha and ask her to turn on her audio and her video and let her introduce herself.
It's not letting me turn my video on.
Let me figure out how to do that. Hide non-video participants, make host change role.
It's probably next to participants and says probably allow participants to turn on video.
Yeah. But I'm just gonna make you a host so that because it doesn't give me that option, but it says your video is not. Okay, so let's see what happens when you become a host.
Hey, look at that.
There we go.
Can you see me? There you go.
I can. Great.
All right. Hi, my name is Amrisha. I'm the infrastructure engineering team lead at MaestroQA. And what we do is we build software for omni-channel quality assurance for modern support teams. Our customers are MailChimp, Peloton, Zendesk, Etsy, Grubhub, and many more. They use our software to improve agent performance and optimize their customer experience processes. And also something I'd like to point out is we recently closed a Series A and we're hiring. So if you're interested in working with me after you hear me talk, please find me on LinkedIn and we can see if there's any roles that fit your profile.
We're hiring too, just for the record. But, awesome.
So we were beginning to build out our QA team to build out our end-to-end test suite using Cypress. And after we built out our initial suite of tests, we realized that the runtime for all of those tests, end-to-end testing, all of our integrations was about 40 minutes because we were running them in serial on CircleCI. And because they were taking so long, we couldn't run them as often as we wanted to, and we needed to really bring that down, which we were able to do with CircleCI's parallelized testing feature. Brought our runtime down to 5 minutes. So we ran all, 100 plus of our tests in under 5 minutes against our staging environment. But with that, we started running into new issues. Our development team grew, and we were running a lot more PRs, a lot more branches on any particular day. And with that came the need to test them. And anytime we tried to test them against our staging environment, we were running into a lot of collisions. So either two tests would be running against one environment at the same time and driving the utilization up, or we would do a deploy mid-test from a different branch that would then change the test state. We were just seeding a ton of data, and every time we tried to reset it, you could monkey with another running test. So we were just running into a lot of collision at various levels. And we needed and because of this collision, we built in a lot of manual triggers. So it was also painful for anyone who wanted to run tests, particularly developers, to have to babysit their branches through our pipeline to try to get some data back on testing. That was the initial state that we were at. Next. So like I said, the challenge was a lot more changes, a lot more branches, a lot more PRs in flight at any particular time. We needed to get a proper process in place for how and when we're going to run these tests. And because we had a single environment, there was a ton of production. So one thing we were able to solidify was, okay, regardless of whether you run it during the development process, you want to make sure that you run our test suite before it goes into production. So everything gets merged into master and then deployed to staging, and then we run our tests. But that would mean that there would be 8 or 9, between 5 and 10, depending on how many engineers, how we were scaling, pull requests merging in at once and being tested at once. So anytime there was a failure, which was pretty often at that point, we wouldn't know really which PR caused it, or which PR was causing the regression, or whether that was intended or not. So it would delay our deploys every time this happened, because we had to go on a hunt to figure out which PR, what do we need to revert, what do we need to resolve, is it okay to deploy even with this failure, because it's a planned change in behavior that was just not caught in testing before. So, it was a very painful process. Our deploys were getting delayed, and we needed to figure out how to do this testing earlier in the process before any merge, and get feedback back to the developers when they were still very engaged in the changes being made for that, rather than, hours or days later when they were being deployed.
Right. Yeah. So it sounds like the feedback loop being that long, and then also it was blocking your actual deploys because, changing button color wasn't that important, but it might break a test. Whereas you might have a critical bug that you needed to get up, but they're all merged at the same time. And so all of a sudden you're actually blocked from deploying because of your test. So it's kind of the antithesis of the whole test thing. You're moving slower because of your test. And so that's a common problem that everybody has. It's a paradigm we've seen a lot at shipyards. One we have ourselves. We all share this pain. Okay, super cool.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Too fast.
Too fast.
Yeah. So that's where Shipyard came in for us. We were at the precipice of figuring out how to do this ourselves. I'm a DevOps engineer to begin with. I do run the QA effort over in MaestroQA, but I'm a DevOps engineer and infrastructure engineer, so I know how to do this. I also know that it's going to be very difficult to manage the states of every different database, to manage uptime, to make DNS changes, networking changes, routing changes, and then also keep them secure, because these are running in our cloud environment. So I know exactly how hard this was, but the pain to our developers and the QA process was becoming so painful that it was something that we would have to figure out sooner rather than later. At that point, I was introduced to Shipyard, and we started the process of seeing how well it would fit into our process. So one thing that it solved for us, which I didn't address earlier, was we were actually running one database for our staging environment, regardless of how many test environments we pointed to it. So we didn't have the data isolation, and that was the cause of a lot of our pain points. And with our setup with Shipyard, we have different databases running for every PR. So every environment has its own truth that is different from the next environment, and they don't interfere with each other, which was key for some of our testing.
So your tests were basically running on top of each other, and so then you were getting flaky tests, but they actually weren't necessarily broken. It's just like the different test was running at a different time. So yeah, that's a huge problem that happens to a lot of people, where when you use a shared testing environment, even if you parallelize these tests. I mean, I know this is an obvious thing to state, but we all kind of forget. We've all had that nightmare where like all 87 tests are failing for some reason. You're like, what happened? And you're like, oh wait, I just ran a second test at the same time. So that isolation of data is kind of something I spoke about a second ago, but that became a really important thing for you guys.
Yes, it became the main thing that we needed out of any solution that came out of it, was the isolation of data. The additional overhead of managing these environments was a cherry on top, but really isolating that data and in a way that worked with our test suite was key.
Right. Now, so you guys do use Circle with Shipyard and Cypress. That's correct?
Yes, we do.
So you guys are using the CircleCI Shipyard orb?
We are.
Yeah, we have an orb. I just want everyone to know.
So CircleCI is where a lot of our developers interact with testing and with Shipyard.
Okay.
And it's also where we build our code centrally. So anytime there's a new commit or a new PR, CircleCI does the heavy upfront work of building the code, and then triggers Cypress once Shipyard is ready. So Circle is kind of helping coordinate between GitHub itself, Shipyard, and Cypress. So we use the orb to figure out when an environment's ready, and then we tell Cypress, here are your details, here's the UI, here's the bypass token, go do your testing. And then Circle also does the reporting for us, tells us when certain things are not passing or failing, as is Shipyard, as is Cypress. Yeah. Great.
Okay, well, so the results.
Yeah, so what we were able to accomplish with this is now every PR that is open into our main branch is getting an isolated environment with isolated data. It all happens automatically. If I push a new commit, then my branch is automatically updated within about 15 minutes of that commit, which is without any babysitting of the CircleCI pipeline. It kind of takes care of itself. I don't have to barter with anybody to take over a QA environment, at least before it's merged into master and has to go into our pre-prod staging environment. One thing that happened is as we were running tests once before every deploy to production, which would be 2 or 3 times a day. When we built out the Shipyard pipeline, we started running them about 5 or 6 times an hour. And we discovered that some of our tests, which would show up flaky once in a while, were actually really flaky when running at so many times in a day. And we were able to go in and prune some of our testing and really do an audit of why this test is flaky, what are we doing here, and bring that test suite down to like a core group of tests that we knew were stable and indicative of an issue. And then because Shipyard is kind of taking care of this pipeline from a DevOps perspective, we're focusing more on production. We're able to focus more on production. and testing is happening seamlessly. Developers are more able to focus on the code that they're working on because they don't have to babysit things through CircleCI. The full end-to-end automation is actually pretty nice for us.
That's awesome. I know one thing that we talked about is that building internal, I mean, one of the challenges for you as a person kind of overseeing the QA stuff is getting internal, usage from the developers themselves to trust the tests and to use the tests. And I know that you said earlier that maybe that's getting a little bit better. I mean, have you seen an uptick in people leaning on an end-to-end test for deploys and helping with confidence and overall process?
Much easier to get engagement with test results now that they're running more often. We're directly pushing the results from these tests into PR. So we're making it really easy for developers to get data on their branches on whether they're passing tests or not. So the level of engagement is definitely increasing, but this is one of the hurdles that we had to cross in order to get more adoption and more feedback around our QA process itself, is giving them this data. So the engagement has definitely increased. The adoption, we're still waiting to measure.
Right. No, that's great. Is there any other cool side effects that you've seen from Shipyard or from ephemeral environments or end-to-end tests in general? It's not just about Shipyard, obviously. Is there any other insights? Because I feel like there's some people that are watching this that are about to take on the pain that you just described. And so any other helpful things, forget Shipyard, but is there anything else on the end-to-end test side that you're like, oh, don't do this, or you should do this as soon as possible?
One thing that I think is key to point out is that we reduced the number of tests that we were running. We knew they were somewhat flaky before we started running them so often, but that wasn't clearer than we were running them on every commit of every PR. And there were just some tests that were not able to keep up because they were resource intensive, or there was some flakiness in how we were doing the test. And getting the amount of data that we got from the number of runs that we did was necessary in order to get that feedback on our test suite itself. So it isn't just a one-way feedback process where we're running the test and then telling developers what's failing. It's also two-way in that it's telling us as a QA team whether the tests we're writing are robust or not. And given that it is that this ephemeral environment end-to-end testing, like the amount of testing we're doing, it's just increasing how much data we have as a whole team around our tests, our commits, on what workflows we're testing. It's just a wealth of data for us to really action on insights from that. So one thing was going back to QA and saying, okay, do we really need all of these tests? Why are they always so flaky? Should we be doing them differently, putting in guards, removing them entirely, and reapproaching it a different way? And that also shows developers that this isn't just something to dump data into their PRs, that we're looking at this as well, and it's shared responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that we struggle with, or that I think every team struggles with, is are these flaky tests actually a problem or not a problem? And so shortening that feedback loop for the tests themselves, forget the code, but the tests themselves, we've seen a lot more ownership on the developer side. They're stepping in, helping out with tests. And we're definitely seeing, we've started getting really good about our end-to-end testing lately. Partially because of working with you on this case study and this Shipyard session. So thank you again for coming. But yeah, and we're just seeing really good results about where we're leaning on the tests more. And I think one of the things that I would say as a former engineer, I don't know what I am now, is that, don't laugh that much at that, please. Is that what we're seeing is that we're building confidence with the developers themselves, so that they're actually oh, testing is not just this pain that slows everything down, that it works one every 100th time. It's something that I can rely on. So it's kind of shifting it a little bit more towards unit tests don't cover everything, but that your database field is a string or not, or a num or an integer or whatever with unit tests. And we're kind of getting there a bit with our other side. Okay, great. Well,
Yeah, I mean, one thing to add to that is because we have the Cypress and GitHub integration turned on. So when we run our Shipyard Cypress tests, that's what we call them. We run them twice. So we run them on Shipyard, then we run them in our staging environment. So we have them as two different items in our CircleCI config. So the Shipyard Cypress integration dumps into the PR directly. So if I'm reviewing a PR for something and I notice that I have my ticket comment and then I have my Shipyard comment and then I have my Cypress comment, it's a lot easier for me to judge whether this PR is ready for merge or not when I know that all my Cypress tests ran and all of them passed. That's a good indicator that there's a level of stability already here in this PR that gives me confidence with approving it without needing to really dig into that. Not that I'm reviewing a lot of the development PRs. I'm really reviewing some of the more DevOpsy stuff that's in the repo. But if I know that I'm making a change that in some way tangentially affects the code, when I'm making a change, if I see test pass for me, then I feel really comfortable about those changes. Myself as a person making the change, but also as a reviewer.
right. Yeah, and I think that's what this is about. We're seeing that trend where like just actually getting our tests up to speed is really valuable. Okay, so that's great. Thank you again. What we're going to do is we're going to bring in Ashley. We'll see if I can get her video to work. Ashley, just see what you can do here. Scared. I don't know. Oh boy. Oh wait, no, Amrisha, I might need you to do it since I'm not the host anymore. Wait, there she is.
It says that I can't share my video, but I think that's fine. We can.
Okay.
You can just
okay.
read through the questions that we have in the chat.
Sorry for the technical difficulties with the video. You think after 2 years I would know how to use Zoom, but of course I don't. They do change it all the time, and I don't know if their end-to-end tests are that good. So.
Awesome. So the first question we have in the chat is, can you use other tools other than Cypress or GitHub Actions, CircleCI with Shipyard?
So I guess that's for me. Yeah. So the way that it works under the hood is that Shipyard has an API that is kind of a, hey, go give me an environment, give me a token so I can bypass the SSO that is associated with every environment, and then tell me when it's ready. And I can go out and do that. So you can do that with Argo, you can do that with Jenkins. We do have a GitHub action that we actually released a week or two ago. Shout out to AK on the team, did a great job getting to the line. That's up in the docs now. We'll be doing a blog post on that. But yeah, so no matter what your CI system is, we do currently have a specific orb for Circle and a GitHub action for GitHub. We do not yet have a Jenkins. I don't know what those are called. Amrisha, what are Jenkins jobs called? I don't know. Butler things. I don't know what Jenkins jobs are called. Or Argo or Flux or any of those things. But they all, it's ultimately a bash script that, and we're happy to, if you reach out, we can help you with that if you need it, but it's pretty straightforward. So yeah, you can use Shipyard with anything you want.
Awesome. Sounds good. If I have multiple repositories, front end, back end, can I still use the same workflow that Amrisha was using, Shipyard, Cypress, CircleCI? Amrisha can actually talk to maybe the future of what they want to do over at Maestro, but I can say that one of the things that's really valuable for us, but also for a bunch of our other customers, is we have multi-repo support. So if you want to do it as a mono repo where you have all your code and all your infrastructure in one repository, we support that. But we also have the ability to mix and match repos. So there's a use case of having a front-end repository, a back-end repository, and maybe, let's say, a data science repository or inference engine or something like that. And you can put all three of those together. And when there is a change or a PR on any of those, it'll trigger a brand new environment and you could run your end-to-end test suite off of all of that. And honestly, kind of the mecca of all of this is this multi-repo testing off of multi-repo, because that's where your front-end code lives. That's very independent from your back-end code often. And so that's really the power of end-to-end tests, is when you could test all of these things without having to have a human do anything. And it just works. But Amrisha, I think you guys you have some plans to start using multi-repo potentially?
Potentially, yeah, depending on how testing goes for those repos. But yeah, there's an opportunity for us to leverage this as well.
Cool.
Next question is for Amrisha. Have you been able to measure an increase in the quality of your releases since you embraced end-to-end testing?
We're not measuring an increase in the quality, but we're looking for more adoption of the QA process within our internal team itself. So QA has been kind of working on its own to build out our test suite. The main metric I'm looking for is getting more holistic adoption of QA itself and doing testing as part of our development process rather than the quality of our application.
That makes a lot of sense. There is one more question on end-to-end tests at Maestro, which is, do you have a rule of thumb for what you end-to-end test?
Yes, we do. We look for our top 10 workflows on what our customers are using across different configuration buckets, and we try to implement those so that we can validate that the top 10 most important workflows for our customers are validating on each build.
I have a follow-up to that one. How do you know what the top 10 workflows are? What do you guys use to measure that?
We have like logs and metrics on what our customers are doing.
Okay.
So we analyze our production data and we translate that into what it would look like in the staging environment and then write automated tests across those.
Super cool. We've been playing with Full Story a little bit here and there and some other ones, but not sure what the right combo is for figuring that out. But very good. Ashley, do we have anything else or wrap up time?
I think that's a wrap.
All right, great. Well, I want to give a big thanks to Amrisha and MaestroQA in general. Big fan of their product and their team for a long time now. Super appreciative of you coming out and taking the time to talk through how you guys are using Shipyard. Few plugs here. Check out MaestroQA, MaestroQA.com. They are hiring. They've got great customers and they are hiring. That much I can tell you for sure. And shipyard.build, sign up if you want to check it out, or just go to shipyard.build, check out our blog. And we've also got a case study on Maestro that you can read some of the details on what stuff we talked about. I think Amrisha did a better job than our case study probably, but maybe there's something in there. And then as always, make sure to check out our community site for ephemeral environments in general, ephemeralenvironments.io. PRs welcome. Right now, we're at the early stages of kind of getting everybody in our community the ability to do end-to-end tests like this early on with a full stack environment, but also getting product owners and all these other people access to features as they're being worked on. And so ephemeralenvironments.io is not necessarily for Shipyard, it's just for in general, trying to educate the community. And PRs welcome. We're still figuring it out, so please feel free. Down there is a Slack for the Shipyard Slack. It's our GitHub, got some sample repositories, some other cool stuff, and our Twitter, of course. Again, I want to thank Amrisha from MaestroQA for coming, and thank you all for attending as well. And have a great afternoon. And really feel free to reach out. Getting your testing right is a huge investment, but also is huge payoff. So I think that we all know it, and that's why we're here. But hopefully some of this was insightful for you and you can use it every day for yourselves. Thanks, everybody.